Hello, and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that gently pull you deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, settle in. Let your body relax into stillness and allow the outside world to quietly fade into silence. Tonight, something lingers in the dark, waiting for you. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself drift into the depths of Umbral Dread. Story 1. My grandfather died in November 2024, but nobody seemed to notice, not even him. I've been carrying this around for almost 2 years, turning it over and over in my head until it feels worn down at the edges. The problem is that the center of it never changes. No matter how many times I replay it, it stays sharp. It's the kind of memory your mind usually softens with time. The kind it edits so you can keep living. Mine hasn't been edited at all. It sits in me like a stone. If I say it out loud, it sounds like I'm mixing up timelines. Like grief scrambled my brain and I stitched together the wrong version of events. I've tried to give myself that excuse. I've tried to be kind to myself and say, okay, you were upset, you were tired, you were in shock, you can't trust your memory. But I remember too much. I remember the cold more than anything. That dry, biting cold that makes your nose sting when you breathe. I remember the way the sky looked around that time, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to snow or just hang there, heavy and gray. I remember the way every house we drove past looked warm and sealed shut, like the whole world had agreed to stay inside and pretend nothing could touch them. My grandfather had been sick for a while. It wasn't one clean thing you could point to. It was like a slow stacking of problems that never fully went away. Every year there was a new medication, a new warning, a new, keep an eye on this. He got thinner, quieter. He started taking breaks halfway up the stairs. He would stand at the kitchen counter and stare at the same spot for a long time, like his thoughts were trying to catch up to him. Still, even with all that, the end felt sudden. One day he was there, in the way he'd always been there, taking up space, asking for the same coffee the same way, complaining about the same little things. Then the next day, everything slid into that strange, hushed mode families fall into when someone dies. Calls that go unanswered because you're on another call. Voices that sound too polite. People showing up with food nobody eats because hunger feels rude. I remember my mom's face when she got the call. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. Her expression just changed, like a light dimming in a room. She sat down at the edge of the couch and put a hand over her mouth, not like she was trying to stop a sound, but like she was holding something in place. My dad took the phone and spoke in that careful voice people use when they know someone is listening too closely. My stomach went cold before I even knew what was happening, like my body had gotten the news first. When we went to my grandparents' house after, it felt wrong. Not because it looked different, but because it looked exactly the same. His slippers were by the door. His jacket was still hanging on the chair like he'd be back for it. The TV was on low, one of those channels he liked that played old shows all day. My grandmother moved around the kitchen like she was operating on muscle memory alone, hands doing what they had done for decades while her eyes looked empty and far away. People kept saying things like, "He's not in pain anymore, and he lived a good life, and at least it was peaceful." Nobody said anything that sounded real. Everything was wrapped in soft words, like we were trying not to wake something up. We had a wake. We had a funeral. It wasn't some fuzzy, half-formed thing. It was a real sequence of days and paperwork and rooms that smelled like flowers and carpet cleaner. I remember standing in the funeral home with my coat still on because I couldn't make myself take it off, like if I stayed bundled up I wouldn't have to feel anything. I remember the murmurs of people I barely knew, the awkward hugs, the way everyone's eyes kept flicking toward the front. I saw him in the casket. That's the part that won't let me go. I saw him. He looked like himself and not like himself at the same time. His skin had that waxy, too smooth look, like someone had taken the real version of him and made a careful copy. His mouth was closed in a way that didn't look natural for him. His hands were folded, and I stared at them because I couldn't make my eyes go anywhere else. I kept thinking about those hands, how they used to be warm and dry and strong, how they held tools and groceries and my shoulder when I was little. I stood there long enough that my legs started to ache. I wanted to feel something dramatic, something that would match the moment. Instead, I felt distant, like I was watching a scene in a movie I didn't want to be in. People around me cried. My grandmother made a sound I had never heard her make before, small and broken, like air being pulled through a crack. My mom's eyes went red and stayed red. At the cemetery, the wind was sharper. The grass looked dead and flattened. The sky was the same dull gray, and the bare trees looked like black scribbles against it. I remember the coffin being lowered. I remember the ropes, the slow movement, the way everyone leaned forward a little, as if the ground itself was telling us to pay attention. And I remember the sound of dirt hitting the coffin. That sound is solid. It has weight. It's not like a dream. It's not like a story you half made up after the fact. Dirt hits wood in a specific way. There's a dull thud, and then a sliding, scratching sound as it falls and piles and spreads. It sounded final in a way nothing else did. It was the only honest sound that day. After the funeral, life did what it always does. It kept going. His chair stayed empty. His name came up in past tense. My grandmother started saying things like, "He would have liked this, and he used to do that," like she was carefully placing him behind a glass wall where he couldn't be hurt anymore. Holidays felt wrong in quiet ways. The table looked too wide. The living room felt too open. There were moments when someone would start to say something, then stop, like they'd almost forgotten for 1 second, and then remembered. Grief wasn't a constant storm. It was more like a constant absence, a draft you could feel even when all the windows were closed. For a while I thought, this is it. This is the sad part of being alive. People leave and you adjust. It hurts, and then it becomes part of the shape of your days. Then, exactly 1 year later, everything broke. It was November again. The air had that same sharp edge. The days were shorter, and darkness came early like it was impatient. My mom called me and said we were going over to my grandparents' house to do something small for the anniversary. She didn't say his name right away. She didn't have to. The month did it for her. I expected a quiet dinner, maybe candles, Maybe some stiff conversation where everyone tried too hard to be normal. I expected my grandmother to look tired and older. I expected that hollow feeling that comes when you step into a house that used to have a person in it, and now it doesn't. When I walked in, he was there. Not in a dramatic, shocking way. Not in a way that made the room freeze or made people scream. He was just there, in the kitchen, moving around like he always had. He was at the counter doing something simple with his hands, like making tea or sorting mail. He wore the same sweater he always wore around the house, the one with the stretched cuffs. His hair looked the same, thin and neatly combed. His posture looked the same, slightly hunched, like his body had learned the shape of age and settled into it. For a second, I couldn't move. My brain felt like it had skipped, like someone had cut a few frames out of reality and glued the rest back together wrong. He looked up at me and smiled, and it was his smile. Not a stranger's, not a trick. His eyes focused on my face the way they always had. "Hey," he said casual, like I had just come over on any normal evening. "You're here." I waited for someone to react. I waited for my mom to drop a plate. I waited for my grandmother to start crying. I waited for anything that would tell me I wasn't the only person seeing what I was seeing. Nothing happened. My grandmother was setting out food like this was expected. My mom kissed his cheek like she always did. My dad nodded at him and asked how traffic had been, like my grandfather had gone out and come back. The strangest part wasn't seeing him. The strangest part was how fast the room forced itself into being ordinary. It was like the air snapped into place around the moment, smoothing it down, pressing it flat. No one hesitated. No one looked confused. No one acted like a man who had been buried in the ground a year ago was now standing in the kitchen. I felt sick. My hands went cold. I tried to smile because everyone else was smiling, and my face didn't do it right. My grandmother glanced at me, and there was something in her look that made my throat tighten. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't relief. It was a warning. We sat down and ate. The food tasted like nothing. Everyone talked about normal things, careful and calm. Work, weather, someone's neighbor getting a new dog. It was like they were following a script. Every time the conversation got too close to anything real, it turned away. My grandfather talked too. He laughed at the same places he always laughed. He told a story about a guy he used to work with, and everyone nodded at the right moments. It was so normal that it made me want to stand up and shout, because normal was the most impossible thing in that room. At one point, I tried to bring it up just to test the edges. I couldn't help it. I said something like, "Last November was..." and I didn't even finish. My mom cut in before I could. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm in a way I had never heard from her. "Don't," she said. I stared at her. I expected her to look scared or angry. She looked controlled, like she was holding a lid down with both hands. My grandmother didn't look up from her plate. My dad cleared his throat. My grandfather kept eating, like the word November didn't mean anything. I laughed awkwardly, like I'd made a weird joke. Nobody laughed back. The air felt tight, like I had leaned too close to a fragile thing, and everyone was waiting to see if it would crack. After that, I stopped trying so directly, at least for that night. When we left, I sat in the car and tried to make sense of it. My mom acted normal. She talked about leftovers. She asked if I wanted to stop for coffee. I kept looking at her hands on the steering wheel, waiting for them to shake. Finally, I said, Mom, what happened? She didn't answer right away. The streetlights slid over her face. Bright, then dark. Bright, then dark. What do you mean? She asked, and her voice was too even. You saw him, I said. You saw Grandpa. You know he... Don't, she said again, sharper this time. I stared out the window. My heart was beating so hard, I could feel it in my throat. We had a funeral, I whispered, more to myself than to her. We buried him. My mom's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might finally break, might finally say, yes, you're right. Something is wrong. I'm scared too. Instead, she said, you're tired. It's been a long day. Then she turned the radio on. That was the first night. After that, it didn't stop. It wasn't some strange one-time event that disappeared the next morning. He was just back, existing in the same spaces, doing the same routines. If you didn't know he had died, nothing about it would seem unusual. He sat in his chair again. He watched his shows. He complained about the price of groceries. He called me by my name like he had never stopped, but nobody would talk about November 2024. Not ever. Not in any context. Not casually, not seriously, not as a joke. The month itself felt like it had been sealed off. If a conversation drifted even close to it, people redirected it like they were steering a shopping cart away from a spill. If I pushed, people got tense or upset. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't like they didn't know what I meant. It felt like avoidance. Like everyone had silently agreed on something, and I hadn't been included. I started paying attention to the little ways they behaved around him. They treated him kindly, but it was a careful kindness, like you handle something that can break. When he left the room, people's faces changed. They glanced at each other quickly, like they were checking that everyone was still following the same rules. If he walked into a conversation, it would shift right away, smoothing itself into harmless topics. No arguments, no hard truths, no talk about doctors or hospitals, nothing that could lead back to that month. And he didn't seem to remember being sick. That part is hard to explain without sounding cruel, because I know what it sounds like. An old man recovering, people grateful, life moving on. But it wasn't recovery. It was like the sickness had been erased from his mind. If someone asked how he was feeling, he'd say, fine, and it would be the end of it. He never mentioned the treatments, the appointments, the way he used to get winded walking to the mailbox. It was as if that entire stretch of his life had been cut out and replaced with blank space. Once, when I was alone with him for a few minutes, I tried to approach it gently. I asked, how have you been feeling lately? Like, compared to last year? He looked at me, eyebrows slightly raised, like I had asked something odd but harmless. Same as always, he said. Why, I wanted to say. Because you died. Because we stood over your body. Because I watched the ground swallow you. But the words stuck in my throat. Even alone with him, the house felt like it had ears. After that conversation, he patted my shoulder and said, you worry too much, in the exact tone he'd used when I was a kid afraid of thunderstorms. His hand was warm. That should have comforted me. It didn't. It made me feel worse because warmth meant blood and life and a body doing what bodies do. It meant my memory had to be wrong. So I tested myself, quietly, carefully. I went looking for proof. I tried to find the obituary online. I remembered reading it. I remembered the photo they chose. One where he was younger and smiling like he didn't know time was coming for him. I remembered the comments from people I didn't know. Little messages that all sounded the same. When I searched, I couldn't find it. Not under his full name, not under variations, not even with the funeral home's name. I tried different browsers like that would matter. I tried from my phone and my laptop. Nothing. I checked my own phone for messages from that time. I found some. Condolences. Plans. People saying, "I'm sorry for your loss." That part was real. But the details felt thin, like the messages were missing context. Like I was looking at a conversation with a few key lines removed. I looked for photos. I knew there were photos from the funeral. Someone had taken pictures outside the church. Someone had taken a picture of the flowers. I wasn't trying to be morbid. I just needed to anchor myself to something solid. But when I scrolled back through my camera roll, that week looked strangely empty. There were a few random shots from around that time, normal life stuff, but not what I remembered. I went to the cemetery. I didn't tell anyone. I drove there alone on a weekday when I knew it would be quiet. The sky was pale and flat, and the wind smelled like wet leaves. I walked through rows of stones, reading names that meant nothing to me, feeling like I was trespassing in a place meant for people who had accepted things. I found a spot, or I thought I did. I remembered where we stood. I remembered the shape of the trees. I remembered the slope of the ground. I remembered the way my shoes sank slightly into the grass because the earth was soft from recent rain. But there was no fresh grave, no marker, no sign that the ground had been opened a year before. The grass was unbroken. It looked like it had been that way for years, like nothing had ever been disturbed there at all. I stood there for a long time, staring at the earth, waiting for my mind to correct itself, waiting to realize I had the wrong place. But it felt right. It felt exactly right. My hands started to shake. I forced myself to walk to the office and ask casually if they could tell me where my grandfather was buried. The woman behind the desk looked up his name on her computer. Her nails clicked on the keyboard. She frowned slightly, leaned closer to the screen, then looked back at me like I had asked something strange. "I'm not seeing him here," she said. I felt heat rush up my neck. "He should be," I said too fast. "He was buried here. Last November." Her expression tightened just a little. Not rude, just cautious. "Are you sure it was this cemetery?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. She turned the monitor slightly, as if showing me would settle it. Rows of data, none of it his. She offered to double-check spelling. I gave her different versions. Nothing. I walked out with my stomach twisting. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and tried to breathe, staring at the steering wheel like it might explain something. I didn't feel like I was going crazy. I felt like I was being lied to by the world. The more time passed, the more little things felt wrong around my grandfather. Not in obvious movie monster ways, in small, unsettling ways that were easy to dismiss if you wanted to. He would tell stories and get details wrong in a way he never used to. Not normal forgetfulness, not age catching up. It was like he had learned the stories from someone else's memory and was repeating them. But the rhythm didn't match. Sometimes he'd swap names. Sometimes he'd place himself in a moment he had never been part of. Then he'd laugh it off, and everyone else would laugh too, a little too quickly. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence and look off to the side like he was listening for something. When I'd ask what he was thinking about, he'd blink and say, "Nothing," and keep going, like the pause had never happened. I started noticing how people watched him when they thought no one else was paying attention. My grandmother, especially. She'd look at him with this mix of tenderness and fear that made my skin prickle. Like she was grateful he was there, but also afraid of what it meant. And there was something else, something harder to pin down. A feeling in the house, like a rule had been written into the walls. Do not say it. Do not point at it. Do not pull on that thread. If I said November, my mom's face would change instantly, like I had said a swear word in church. If I mentioned the year 2024 at all in any context, the conversation would shift away from it. If I said funeral, people would act like they didn't hear me. If I said wake, my grandmother would start talking louder about something else, as if she could drown me out without directly arguing with me. Once, I tried to talk to my dad alone. I didn't accuse him. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "You remember what happened, right? You remember last year?" He stared at the sink for a long time, hands braced on the counter. Finally, he said very quietly, "Drop it." I waited. I thought he would add something, anything, an explanation, a plea, a confession. He didn't. He just turned on the water and started washing a glass that was already clean. That was when I stopped believing this was an accident. This wasn't, we all processed it differently. This wasn't my family being in denial. This was a choice. I spent nights lying in bed, replaying the funeral like a tape. I tried to find flaws in it. I tried to imagine how I could have misremembered so much. But the memories were too physical. The cold air, the smell of flowers, the hard edge of the casket when I leaned too close, the gritty sound of dirt. And every year when November came back around, that pressure came back too. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was like being underwater, like something heavy was pushing down on the whole month. The days felt tense. The house felt quieter. People smiled less. My grandmother would clean more than usual, like she was trying to scrub away time itself. My mom would call more often and talk about nothing, as if keeping the line open was a kind of protection. My grandfather, during those weeks, would get restless. He'd pace a little. He'd check the locks twice. He'd sit by the window and watch the street like he was waiting for someone to arrive. Once, on a cold evening, I caught him standing in the hallway with the lights off. He was facing the closed door to the basement. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, still as a piece of furniture. I said his name softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned his head toward me slowly, and his face looked blank for a split second, like he wasn't sure what expression belonged there. Then the usual look returned, and he smiled. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Just checking on things." I looked at the basement door. I don't know what I expected. For it to move, for something to scratch at it, for a sound. There was nothing. But the air in that hallway felt colder than the rest of the house, and I couldn't shake the thought that he had been listening again. After that, I started to wonder if he really didn't remember, or if he remembered in a way he couldn't admit. Like the memory was there, but saying it out loud would make it real again. Like speaking it would reopen something that had been carefully sealed. That's the part that frightens me most. Not the idea that my grandfather came back, the idea that the act of noticing is dangerous. Because sometimes when I'm sitting at that kitchen table and he's talking about something normal, I get this sudden sense that there's a thin layer over everything, like paint over crack, and if I press too hard, it will split. Not just in my family's mood, but in the world itself. And I can see it in them, too. The way they keep conversations inside safe boundaries. The way they glance at each other when I walk into the room. Like they're measuring me. Like they're wondering if I'm going to ruin it. There are moments when I look at my grandfather and I feel love. Real love. The kind that makes you want to protect someone even when you're angry. He's my grandfather. He made me pancakes when I stayed over as a kid. He taught me how to hold a flashlight steady. While he worked on something, he told me dumb jokes and laughed at them like they were the funniest thing in the world. Then there are moments when I look at him and I feel something else underneath the love. A fear that sits in my chest like a held breath. Because a part of me is always waiting for the wrongness to show itself in a way nobody can ignore. 2 years is a long time to live with a split like this. On one side is my life, my family, my grandfather alive and present, everyone acting like this is normal. On the other side is the sound of dirt hitting the coffin, and the weight of a year where we all said goodbye. I've tried to convince myself I'm the one who broke. That grief created a false memory so strong it feels real. That my mind built a funeral because I needed one, and now I can't let it go. But brains don't just make up a whole year by themselves, do they? And even if they do, what am I supposed to do with the way my family reacts when I get too close to it? What am I supposed to do with the way my mother's eyes harden when I say that month? Like she's scared of what might happen if we admit the truth. Sometimes I think my family is trying to protect me. Sometimes I think they're trying to protect themselves. Sometimes I think they're trying to protect him. And sometimes, late at night, when November is close and the air in the house feels too still, I think they're trying to protect something else entirely. Something that comes with him. Something that took his place, or brought him back, or rewrote the story so smoothly that everyone but me forgot there was ever a break in it. My grandfather laughs in the living room. My grandmother calls him for dinner. My mom tells him to dress warm when he goes outside. My dad talks about sports with him like nothing ever happened. Everything is just as it was. But in my head, buried deep where I can't reach it without shaking, there's still that clean, heavy sound. Dirt hitting the coffin. And every time November returns, the pressure returns with it. Like the world is holding its breath right along with me, waiting to see if this is the year someone finally says what we're all pretending not to know. Story 2, I used to tell myself, it could have been worse whenever something got under my skin. It was always true. Looking back, that says a lot about the kind of choices I'd made with my life. Sure, the chains rubbed my ankles raw, but that would heal. Sure, the dread in my stomach had me twisted up so tight I felt sick, and every bump in the van made it worse. We weren't on a paved road. We were bouncing over dirt and rock, and each jolt made the cuffs bite a little deeper. Fine. I could handle that. It wasn't even my first time being tied up in a sketchy van, headed to a place nobody bothered to name. No. What almost pushed me over the edge was the morning breath of the squinty-eyed bastard sitting across from me. The guards had chained him to his seat the same way they'd chained me. The moment I got my first real whiff, I did what I thought was the polite thing. I asked the guard, nicely, if he had a mint. He smacked his gum, stared at me like I'd insulted his mother, and slammed the door. I was not thrilled. To make it worse, Squinty took my request personally, like I'd attacked his honor. He flexed one thick arm, jabbed a finger at me, and leaned forward just far enough to send a fresh wave of stink into my face. Then he said, in the slow and serious tone of a man who thought he was scary, that it was a privilege, not a right, for the teeth in my mouth to stay connected to my skull. As threats go, it wasn't impressive. For one thing, he couldn't reach me across the van. For another, he wasn't getting out of his chains. And that empty little stare he had didn't exactly scream mastermind. He looked like the kind of guy who'd lose an argument with a stop sign. Still, I decided to be the bigger person. First day on the job. No reason to start a fight with my new coworker when I didn't even know what kind of job it was. I wish I'd had that kind of self-control earlier in my life. Then maybe I wouldn't have ended up here at all. Back in my cell, I'd had rats for roommates. They smelled like rats, which is to say they smelled awful. But if I'd known what Squinty smelled like, I would have hugged those rats and thanked them for their effort. None of this would have happened if I hadn't signed that contract. A third-party lawyer had come to the prison and asked to speak with me. He sat me down like we were having a business meeting instead of a conversation about how to use a man with a life sentence. He slid a thick contract across the table, smiling like he was doing me a favor. He kept the job description simple. Too simple. He used words like philanthropic and opportunity. He said some big company wanted to give local inmates a chance at honest work. He promised fair pay and humane conditions. He even acted offended that I looked suspicious, like I was rude for noticing how carefully vague he was. I told him, politely at first, that he could take his contract and shove it. He didn't get mad. He leaned in and started talking about perks. Not freedom exactly, but the closest thing a person like me could get, a different cell, a room on company property, no roommates, maybe supervised trips into town, fresh air, new scenery, a reason to wake up that wasn't just another day of waiting to die. I meant to spit in his face. Instead, I picked up the pen. That's the ugly truth. When you've been caged long enough, you start to confuse comfort with mercy. You start to believe that if someone offers you a slightly bigger cage, you should be grateful. The van stopped so suddenly it yanked me out of my thoughts. The chain between my ankles snapped tight. The metal dug in, and pain shot up my legs. I heard the front doors open and close. 2 sets of boots moved across gravel, circling around to the back. Then the doors swung open, and sunlight poured in so bright it made my eyes sting. Fresh air hit my face like a gift. One guard stood back with his hand resting on his weapon. The other climbed in and started unlocking us. I noticed right away that he'd replaced his gum. Of course he had. He couldn't be bothered to help me earlier, but he sure as hell wasn't going to suffer himself. He pulled Squinty out first. Then he came for me. I stepped down onto the ground and did a little stomp and shake to get feeling back in my legs. The cuffs had left my ankles numb, and the pins and needles hurt like fire. As soon as I moved too much, the metal bit into my skin again and reminded me that healing would come later, if it came at all. Squinty didn't shake out his legs. He puffed his chest and tried to stare down the guards like he was about to take over the operation. I rolled my eyes. He was built like an upside-down tree, huge shoulders, thick arms, a torso that looked like it was carrying too much weight, legs that seemed too thin to hold him up. A stiff breeze could have knocked him flat. The gum-chewing guard clipped us onto a shared leash and tugged us forward. We walked along a narrow trail hidden in thick forest. Branches scratched at my arms. Leaves stuck to my prison clothes. The sun beat down hard through the gaps, and sweat started on my back almost immediately. The other guard followed behind, quiet, hand still on his weapon. Between the heat, the chains, and Squinty breathing like a dying engine, I wondered again why I'd said yes to any of this. I didn't even know what this was. I should have actually read the contract instead of letting hope do my thinking for me. The longer we walked, the more my mind drifted toward darker explanations. For all I knew, this was an execution with extra steps. Take 2 prisoners out into the woods, out of sight, out of mind. Claim they tried to run, put bullets in their backs, fill out the paperwork, go to lunch. I was so deep in that thought that I didn't notice the clearing until we stepped into it. The trees pulled back from the center, like they wanted nothing to do with what was there. The ground in the middle wasn't just a hole. It looked like a tear, a long wound in the earth. The edges were rough and broken, like something had clawed its way up and left the land split open behind it. Even the nearest tree trunks leaned away, as if they were trying to escape. The gum guard tugged the chain again and dragged us closer, right toward the place everything else avoided. With each step, I saw more of what was inside. A tunnel dropped down into the ground, twisting past where the daylight reached. At the mouth of it stood a woman. She looked almost friendly at first glance. Blonde hair catching the sun like a halo. Calm face, easy posture. Then I noticed the taser strapped to her side. I noticed the way she carried herself, like she knew she didn't need to raise her voice to be obeyed. She looked strong. Not gym strong, real strong. The kind of person who could put you on the ground and keep you there. She nodded once at the guards as we approached. They didn't nod back. The gum guard checked his watch, popped a bubble, and gestured. He and his partner took positions on either side of us and nudged us forward until we were standing in front of her, like we were being delivered. She smiled. "I'm the zookeeper," she said. "Your jobs are to assist me with the animals." I almost made a joke. Something about Squinty needing a handler. Something stupid to break the tension. But her smile stopped me. It did everything a smile is supposed to do. It softened her face. It crinkled the corners of her eyes. It lifted her mouth in a warm curve. And still the feeling in my gut tightened, like my body knew something my brain hadn't figured out yet. The zookeeper didn't explain anything else. She turned and walked into the tunnel, and the darkness swallowed her from the waist down, then the shoulders, then the top of her head. The last thing I wanted was to follow her into a hole in the earth. I hated tight spaces. I hated the idea of tons of rock above me. For a second, a desperate thought flashed through my mind. Run. make them shoot you out here under the sun. At least you'd die in the open. But behind me were 2 armed guards, and in front of me was the only job I'd signed up for. Either way, I wasn't in control. Sandwiched between Squinty and the guards, I went down into the tunnel. The temperature dropped fast. The deeper we went, the more the cold crawled up my body, like shadows were climbing me. My ankles disappeared into darkness, then my knees, then my waist. I had never been so aware of the sun as I was in the moment it stopped touching me. Like the world above let go of my head, and I fell into something waiting underneath. The zookeeper's flashlight threw weak yellow light ahead. The guards switched on theirs too, one beam in front and one behind, caging us in a narrow tunnel of light. I don't know how she navigated that place. The tunnel split and twisted. They branched like veins. Every time I thought I'd learned the layout, we'd turn and my sense of direction would vanish again. Sometimes the passage narrowed so much I had to turn sideways. The stone pressed in close and stole my body heat. The cold didn't soothe my chafed ankles. It just made the cuffs feel sharper, like the metal had teeth. Squinty suffered more than I did. His size betrayed him. More than once he had to stop, exhale hard, and shove himself through tight spaces. When he took too long, the guard in front yanked his chain in warning. The clank of metal in that cave sounded wrong, too sharp, too loud, like the sound didn't belong down there, like the stone was listening. Something else besides claustrophobia started to crawl up my spine. A sense that we weren't just underground. A sense that we'd stepped into a place with different rules. The mouth of the tunnel back in the clearing had looked like a wound. Now, walking deeper, it felt like the wound led into an infected pocket under the world. A hidden space where daylight didn't reach and no one had to care what happened. My heart beat faster. Each thump made my ankles hurt. Each breath tasted stale. Then the pressure eased as a warmer glow appeared ahead. The zookeeper clicked off her flashlight, and we stepped into a wide cavern lit by hanging lanterns. Yellow light softened the stone and made it feel almost normal, almost like some kind of underground workroom. There was furniture, tables, a chair. The sight of something human down there made me want to laugh, because it felt ridiculous, like you could put a table in a cave and pretend it was safe. Along one wall hung a line of bright orange jackets. On the opposite wall were fur coats. The fur looked dark, rough, and matted. Not fancy, not clean. The kind of fur you got from something that didn't want to be caught. The zookeeper turned back toward us, tapped her flashlight against her palm, and nodded to the guards again. They ignored her. The gum guard hooked our chain to a clamp on the wall. His partner stood near the cavern entrance, checked his watch, and made a little shooing gesture like we were slowing down his day. Neither guard lingered. Their flashlight beams bobbed away into the tunnel until the light faded. Then their footsteps faded too. I listened hard, wishing I could memorize the direction by sound alone. But the cave swallowed everything. When the quiet settled, the zookeeper walked to a table and set down a key. She placed it gently, like she was offering something generous, not something she was required to do. Then she stepped back and looked at both of us. "Unlock your chains," she said, "and put on a jacket. It's colder further in." The moment she said it, tension broke like a thread snapping. Squinty lunged for the key. The chain yanked him back, and it yanked me, too. I stumbled, caught myself, and forced a calm I didn't feel. I unclipped the clamp from the wall with a big, obvious motion, like I was doing him a favor. He grunted and dragged both of us to the table. Of course, he grabbed the key first. I leaned against the table, watching him with one eye and watching the zookeeper with the other. She had moved across the cavern and put on one of the fur coats, plus a matching hat. Even as she dressed, she didn't turn her back on us. The orange jackets were thick and puffy, like high-visibility winter gear. Practical. Loud. The kind of thing you wore if you needed people to find you quickly. But the fur coat on the zookeeper bothered me. It looked too coarse, too heavy, like it was meant to protect against something worse than weather. Squinty finished unlocking himself, and his chains hit the floor with a harsh clatter. He shoved the metal aside with his boot, cracked his neck, and ignored me completely as he walked straight toward the zookeeper. I snatched the key the second he left it and started working on my own locks as fast as I could. Squinty stopped inches from her, puffed up like a threat. The zookeeper didn't flinch. She only tilted her head enough to meet his eyes. The look she gave him wasn't fear. It was the look you give a dog that's barking too loud. Squinty hesitated. For a split second, I thought he might back down. Then his pride kicked in. The zookeeper spoke calmly, still smiling. "You're free to leave if you want," she said. "But I don't recommend it. It's easy to get lost." I froze with the key half-turned in my lock. My whole body went still, like sound itself might be dangerous. Squinty twitched. He hadn't expected that. Neither had I. It made a terrible kind of sense, though. If the caves were confusing enough, she didn't need chains. She didn't need guards. The place itself was the cage. Squinty tried again, desperate to regain control. He leaned forward and said, "The guards have to come back sometime. Too bad for them, I'll have a hostage." I turned the key quickly, using his voice to cover the click. I didn't want either of them noticing me at all. My hands shook, but I kept working. The zookeeper smiled again, but this one didn't reach her eyes. "My job isn't hard," she said. "They don't need me when anyone can feed the animals." I stopped moving. The words hit me wrong. Anyone can feed them. Like feeding was simple. Like the dangerous part wasn't keeping the animals alive, but keeping them contained. Squinty's eyes flicked to the taser on her hip. He backed away slowly, still trying to look tough, even as the confidence drained out of him. I held my breath and let my chains finally drop to the floor. The sound rang out, loud in the cavern. Neither of them reacted. I grabbed an orange jacket and pulled it on. The padding felt ridiculous down there, like wearing a life vest in a mine shaft. But the warmth was real and immediate. Once Squinty had shuffled back toward the table, the zookeeper turned and flicked her wrist, telling us to follow. She led us down a new corridor lined with lanterns. The light was warm at first, yellow and steady. Then, little by little, the color changed. A pale glow began to creep in from ahead, the kind of light that makes skin look sick. We rounded a bend, and I stopped. Ice covered parts of the wall, thick glossy sheets that looked like they'd been poured there. The ice glowed faintly, like it had light trapped inside it. Ice wasn't supposed to glow. The zookeeper glanced back, her face washed out in that pale light. "Keep moving," she said. So we did. The deeper we went, the more ice there was. Walls, ceiling, patches across the floor. It was everywhere. It made the air feel sharper, thinner, like the cold had teeth. Finally, we came to a wide cavern. A ledge circled the room and sloped down in a slow ramp, like a path built around a pit. The drop on the far side wasn't deep enough to kill you outright, but it looked deep enough to break you and leave you alive. The zookeeper stopped beside a row of metal hooks, hammered into the stone. "Hang up your jackets," she said. I stared at her, sure I'd heard wrong. Squinty stared too, his mouth hanging open for once, like even he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I managed, "What?" She spoke slowly, like she was explaining something obvious to children. "Your warmth is bait," she said. "It won't do any good trapped inside your jacket." The cold hit me harder just from the idea of taking it off. Squinty's face tightened. Pride flared again. He started to swell up, ready to push back, ready to prove he still mattered down here. A familiar feeling crawled through me. The same sense of danger I'd felt when he'd approached her before. Like we were standing near a line in the ground and he was about to step over it. He turned away for a second, like he might actually obey. Then he spun and swung at her. The zookeeper leaned back just enough. His fist missed her face by inches, brushing strands of her hair like a near miss in a slow-motion clip. The force of his swing pulled him off balance. She moved fast. She stepped in, kicked his knee, and caught his arm. He yelped. Before he could recover, she twisted his arm behind his back like it was nothing. "Will you behave?" she asked, voice calm, like she was asking about the weather. "Fuck you," Squinty shouted. There was a sharp snap. Squinty staggered forward, one arm hanging wrong. I flinched so hard my shoulders jumped. He tried to take another swing with his good arm. The zookeeper sidestepped again, kept her grip on the broken arm, and drove him into the wall. His head hit stone with a dull impact that made my stomach drop. He screamed. The zookeeper waited until the noise dipped just enough for her to be heard. Then she leaned closer, speaking quietly. "I'll only ask one more time," she said. "Will you behave?" Squinty's eyes went wide. He looked like someone had finally reached the part of his brain that understood consequences. For a moment, I honestly thought he might refuse just because he couldn't stand being told what to do. Then he mumbled yes. She let him go and turned toward me like nothing had happened. I didn't wait to be asked. I pulled my orange jacket off and hung it on the cleanest hook I could find. Squinty, who didn't look very squinty anymore, not with his eyes stretched wide by fear, unzipped his jacket with shaking hands and hung it on the hook beside mine. The hook he used wasn't clean. When he stepped away, I saw why. There was skin on it. A strip of it stuck and drooping like a label. My throat closed. My hands went numb for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. The zookeeper pointed across the ledge toward the ramp. "Go down," she said. "There are 2 circles in the center of the floor. Each of you will stand in one and wait." We went down. The middle of the ramp had been scraped clear of ice, but the edges still glowed. The ice was strangely clear. It reminded me of spit frozen into sheets, thick and glossy. It dripped from icicles overhead, slid down stone, and pooled at the bottom of the cavern like a frozen tide. In the center of the floor, 2 circles had been carved out of the ice, bare stone islands in the sea of glass. I stepped into the circle farther away from everyone. 6 extra feet felt like a mile in my head, even if I knew it wouldn't help. Squinty stepped into the other circle, eyes lowered like a dog that had just been kicked and finally understood it couldn't bite back. I didn't let myself feel sorry for him. I reminded myself he'd do worse to me if he got the chance. From below, the cavern looked different. The hooks were high above, and the orange jackets hung there like warning flags. The tunnel we'd come through opened above us. Other tunnels yawned open at weird angles around the cavern walls, like mouths caught mid-scream. The biggest tunnel opened directly beneath the ledge where the jackets hung. Mist curled out of it in thin waves, sliding along the ice before fading into nothing. The zookeeper walked to that tunnel entrance. The mist swirled around her boots like it knew her. "This is your only job today," she said. "Stay in the circle until I tell you otherwise." I swallowed and forced my voice to work. "What does that mean?" She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "It means don't move," she said. "Cover your mouth or look away if you need to. And keep your breath heat to yourself." The idea sounded insane. We were supposed to lure something with our body heat, but also not breathe on it. Like it could smell warmth and hunt it, but couldn't handle the heat of breath. Then, for the second time that day, she turned and walked into darkness without looking back. The fur coat made her shape look less human. For a second, as her outline faded, she looked like she belonged to the cave more than we did. She disappeared, and the tunnel swallowed the last of her pale light. The silence that followed felt stretched tight. Then metal crashed somewhere in the dark. It was so loud I almost jumped out of my circle. My whole body jerked. Squinty shifted too, panic flashing across his face. A few seconds later came softer clanks, farther away. A sound I knew too well. Chains. Mist rolled out of the tunnel, heavier now, like breath from a giant mouth. Something big moved inside it. At first I thought the zookeeper were coming back. Then the shape grew, taller than her, wider than any person should be, and my stomach dropped. The silhouette reminded me of a bison. Massive head, heavy shoulders, horns pushing out from either side. Its arms hung too low, almost brushing the ground. Hooves clacked against the ice as it stepped forward, slow and unsteady, like it was learning how to walk in its own body. The smell reached us a second later. Rotting meat. A thick, sour stench that made my eyes water instantly. I would have paid money to smell Squinty's breath again. I turned my head and gagged. Tears leaked out of my eyes, blurring my vision, but even through the blur I saw it step closer, tugging at the chains attached to it. It moaned. The sound was deep, unhappy, and weirdly close to speech, like something trying to shape words with the wrong mouth. I shut my eyes tight like a kid in a horror movie. Like that would save me. The chains snapped tight with a violent clatter as it yanked against the lead. I heard jaws snap. I felt cold spit hit my cheek. I smelled its breath so close it made my head spin. There was no warmth, not from its breath, not from its body, not from anything about it. It was like a walking freezer full of death. It bellowed and stamped on the ice, frustrated that I wouldn't move. Then it turned. It was drawn to the only other heat in the room, Squinty. I opened my eyes just enough to see it. Up close, it was worse. Its skin didn't look whole. It looked like it was coming apart in thick, dirty sheets. One heavy flap hung off its back, swinging as it moved. Every time it pulled the chain, Red marks swelled above its hooves where the metal had rubbed raw. It groaned again, and this time the sound landed in my brain as words. Cold, it said, then softer like a complaint. Cold. Squinty hesitated. If the thing hadn't spoken, he might have stayed in his circle. Fear of the zookeeper might have kept him frozen. But the moment it talked, human words from a monster mouth, his mind broke the rule and ran straight into panic. He tried to run. He stepped on the ice, slipped, and his foot shot backward, right into the creature's reach. Its arms snapped out and grabbed him by the heel like he weighed nothing. Squinty screamed. The creature didn't react to the scream. It just pulled him in, wrapped him in a hug that looked almost gentle for half a second. Then it squeezed. Squinty's eyes locked on mine. He kicked and twisted, legs flailing in the air. His face went red. His eyes bulged. He tried to pull away with his good arm, but the creature held him like he was a toy. There was a loud crack. His legs went still. The creature turned toward me. I hadn't looked it in the eyes before. Now I did, and my blood felt like it froze. Its eyes were cloudy, like mist trapped behind glass. But as it stood there, holding Squinty's limp body, something shifted. The haze in its eyes drained a little. Its posture steadied, like heat was filling it. And at the same time, the chains around it began to strain. Tiny cracks appeared in the links. They looked like smiles. The creature's mouth twitched in a similar way, lips pulling back into something too human to belong on that face. It stepped toward the edge of my circle and opened its arms like it wanted to hold me next. 6 feet away, between me and the ramp. No time to think, no time to pray, only one choice left. Move or die. I moved. I didn't run toward the ramp, not with that thing between me and it. I ran toward one of the side tunnels, into the twisted cave system beyond. The creature lunged after me, hooves clacking, chains rattling like laughter. For one terrible moment, I felt claws scrape my ankle. I stumbled. I almost went down. Ice burned under my feet. I threw myself into the tunnel and kept running until the passage narrowed too tight for the monster to follow. Its roar shook the stone behind me, echoing and twisting, like the cave was replaying it in different voices. I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs felt like they were tearing. I ran until my legs were numb. I ran until I couldn't. When I finally collapsed, I hit stone so cold it stole the last of my strength. I lay there shaking, feeling warm on the inside and frozen on the outside. My breath came out in rough gasps that burned. My skin felt dead. I turned my head and saw the scratches on my leg where the creature had caught me. I couldn't even feel them, not really. I pinched my own nose hard, just to confirm my face still existed. I felt pressure, nothing else. I wanted it to hurt. Pain would have been proof I was still alive. What the hell was this place? From the moment we'd entered, everything had felt wrong. Glowing ice. A woman who called herself the zookeeper. An animal that spoke. I curled up, breathed into my hands, tried to warm my fingers. It didn't help. I didn't have time to sit there. Frostbite wasn't some spooky legend. It was real, and it didn't care about my fear. My best option should have been to retrace my steps. I told myself I hadn't taken too many turns. I told myself I could find my way back. But the idea of going back toward that cavern made my stomach twist. I forced myself upright. My legs responded slowly, like they didn't belong to me anymore. I shuffled forward and tried to focus on one simple task. Keep moving. The glowing ice patches started to thin out as I went. Good. I hated the way they lit the stone with that sick light. But as the ice faded, darkness took over, and that was its own problem. I needed light. Then, up ahead, I saw a glow. Yellow. Warm. Real. It looked like the first flower pushing through snow, something out of place and hopeful. I turned the corner and nearly cried. A room. Not a cavern. Not a tunnel. A room with racks and a table and a battery lamp sitting there, like someone actually worked down here. And the racks were full of fur coats. Dozens of them. They were dark, matted, heavy-looking. They smelled bad, even from a distance. But I didn't care. I lunged for the closest one and shoved my arms into it. Warmth trapped itself around me instantly. Not perfect warmth, not comfortable, but enough that my shaking slowed and my fingers started to sting. The sting turned into pain. I almost laughed from relief. Pain was a gift. I paced the room until my shivering stopped. Then I looked closer at the table. Tools were spread across it. A battery-powered lamp sat near the edge. I grabbed the lamp without thinking and jerked my hand back fast. The metal handle was freezing. I used my sleeve, lifted it carefully, and slipped my hand through the strap so it hung from my wrist. Then I picked up the sharpest tool I could find, wrapping my hand in my sleeve so I didn't touch cold metal directly. It was a skinning knife. There were rust-colored stains on the blade that made my mouth go dry. I looked back at the racks of coats and finally let myself see what my brain had been avoiding. Some of them didn't hang like coats. They hung too flat in places, too heavy in others. Like the shape was wrong. I stepped closer and checked the nearest ones. The coats near the entrance seemed like coats, at least from a distance, though the smell grew stronger as my nose warmed. Then I moved farther down the line. The coats stopped looking like coats. They looked like sheets of fur, just fur. No lining, no sleeves, no shape. My stomach rolled. I didn't step any closer. There was only one other exit from that room. I wasn't going back the way I came. Not after what I'd seen, and not with that creature somewhere behind me. So I chose the only path left, armed with a lamp, a knife, and a kind of denial that I pretended was confidence. As I walked, the smell followed me. It clung to the fur coat, to the air around me, to the back of my throat. I didn't need to be a genius to guess where the fur came from, but I still tested it anyway. Like confirmation would make it easier to swallow. I pressed my nose into my sleeve and breathed in. Rotten meat. The same stink as the creature's breath. I gagged and almost threw the coat off right there. Then the cold bit into my face, and the choice became simple again. I wanted to keep my nose more than I wanted to smell clean air. That tunnel didn't branch. It went straight, which felt like mercy. As long as it stayed simple, I could pretend it was leading me somewhere safe. The lamp's light felt better than the pale glow of the ice. It was warmer, more human. That had to mean I was going the right way, right? But the temperature didn't rise. My skin stayed warmer inside the coat, but my breath froze the second it left my mouth. It hung in the air, building into fog. Not normal fog, either. Heavy fog. Thick. Like something being poured into the tunnel. The air got harder to breathe. The light from my lamp dimmed as the fog swallowed it. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. Fog was still there, growing, turning the tunnel into a white, choking blur. I didn't want to keep walking. Every instinct screamed to stop, turn around, run anywhere else. But I didn't. I kept moving because the fog didn't just fill the tunnel, it filled my head. It made my thoughts slow and heavy. It made fear feel far away, like it couldn't reach me through the haze. I wasn't brave. I was numb. At some point, the lamp died. The light vanished without drama. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. I didn't even swear. I just kept moving, feeling the wall with one hand, stumbling forward in complete darkness. I fumbled the knife. It slipped from my grip and clattered onto stone, then skidded away into the dark. I didn't go after it. I didn't care. That was the worst part. Not the cold, not the darkness, not the monster. The fact that I stopped caring because my mind had nothing left to spend on panic. Eventually, the fog began to thin. My hands looked strange when I held them up, hazy at the edges like I was reappearing slowly. The air cleared in front of me, and ahead, faint but steady, the pale glow returned. Glowing ice. I stepped out of the thinning mist and into the familiar cavern, right through the same tunnel where I'd seen the creature emerge earlier. No sign of the monster. Broken chains lay scattered across the ice, twisted and snapped, and nearby, what was left of Squinty was still there, dark against the frozen shine. I didn't stop. I didn't spit. I didn't pray. I just walked. I reached the ramp and started up. It was harder now. My legs were stiff. My feet didn't trust the ground. Each step felt like it could slide out from under me, and the fall looked like it would hurt in exactly the way you didn't recover from. I was about halfway up when I heard footsteps. Not mine. I froze, listening. The steps continued, overlapping my silence coming from above. I lifted my head toward the ledge where we'd entered. My orange jacket still hung there, bright against the stone, right near the tunnel mouth. A shaggy silhouette formed beside it. For a second, my exhausted brain tried to make it the zookeeper. It wasn't. It stood too tall. Its arms hung too low. The creature stepped out onto the ledge. Its cloudy eyes rolled around, searching, struggling to focus. It sniffed the air, found me, and its lips pulled into that awful, human-like smile. It opened its arms. It came down the ramp toward me. I turned to run. My foot slipped on ice. The world tilted. Floor and ceiling traded places in my vision. I heard the creature scream. Then something yanked me backward hard, twisting me around. I hit the ground, but not the ice. Something softer and heavier broke my fall. The creature hit the ground instead, and I landed on it. For a second, I didn't understand. I thought it had tackled me. I thought it had trapped me. Then I realized what it had done. It had thrown itself between me and the drop. It groaned and pushed itself up, and in the movement it lifted me with it, careful, almost gentle, like it didn't want to crush me. I waited for the squeeze, for the crushing hug, for the end. It didn't come. If anything, warmth came instead. Heat radiating off its body in a way it hadn't before. And as that heat touched me, I felt something strange, like I was pulling warmth out of it just by being near it. I know how that sounds. I know it doesn't make sense. But that's what it felt like a transfer. Like my life was filling a space inside it. For a moment, it almost felt kind. That was the part that scared me most. I twisted and wriggled, and the only way I could get free was to abandon the fur coat. I slipped out of it like shedding skin and stumbled backward up the ramp. The creature held the coat. It looked at me, looked at the coat, looked at me again. Then it made a sound that wasn't just a roar, it sounded like pain, like loss, like something human trapped inside a wrong body and finally realizing what it didn't have. It bellowed, and the sound hit my chest like a hammer. White-hot pain shot through my heart and shook the last numbness out of me. The cold fog in my head burned away, and suddenly I could move again. Before I could take another step, a chain whipped out of the darkness and looped around the creature's neck like a noose. Then another chain, then another. More chains snapped tight around its limbs, yanking it backward as it fought and thrashed. I didn't think. I just reached out. I don't know why. Maybe because I saw the fire in its eyes. Maybe because I knew what it meant to be trapped. Maybe because I'd felt that strange moment of warmth and couldn't stand to watch it be extinguished. The creature reached for me too, straining, clawed hands stretching toward mine. Our fingers didn't meet. The chains dragged it back, down the ramp and into the tunnel darkness. My hand closed on empty air. The darkness swallowed it. It cried out one more time, and this time the sound was close enough to words that my blood chilled all over again. "Thesis," it screamed. Then it was gone. Silence fell like a curtain. Footsteps approached from the tunnel, steady and unhurried. A shaggy silhouette emerged. It grew sharper, then smaller, and then the zookeeper stepped out. She looked the same as before, calm and controlled, with a fresh slab of matted fur draped over her shoulder, like a butcher carrying meat. She glanced at me, expression unreadable. Without saying a word, she turned and started up the ramp, flicking her wrist for me to follow. I followed because what else was I going to do? At the top, she took my orange jacket down from a hook and helped me into it like I was some half-frozen kid she didn't want to deal with. I wanted to ask why she was suddenly acting almost helpful. I couldn't get the words out. Maybe she saw the question on my face because she shrugged. "You survived," she said. "So you're worth something. Come on, let's get out of here." We moved back through the tunnels. Somehow, with her leading, the maze felt shorter, like the cave itself made room for her. We reached the lantern cavern, where our chains still lay on the floor where I'd dropped them. The air felt warmer there. The ice glow was gone. I couldn't see my breath anymore. The zookeeper took off her fur coat and hung it back up like it was just work gear. Even without it, she reminded me of the creature, not in looks, in presence, in the way the cave seemed to accept her. She told me to leave my orange jacket. I didn't argue. My body felt like it was running on borrowed time and borrowed warmth anyway. I expected her to make me put my chains back on. She didn't. She just motioned for me to follow her out. I guess I didn't need chains anymore. Not with a place like that behind us. We climbed back toward the surface, and the thought of the creature wouldn't leave my mind. It sat behind my eyes like a picture burned into glass. I felt like if I didn't ask now, I'd lose the chance forever. Like the memory would dissolve the moment sunlight hit my face. So I forced the question out, voice rough. "What did it mean?" I asked. "Thesis." "What did it mean?" The zookeeper didn't slow down. "You mean Theseus," she corrected, like she was fixing a spelling test. "We used to have two. This one called the other Theseus." She glanced back at me, and for a moment her eyes softened, just a little, like she almost remembered what it was like to be human. Then the softness vanished. "It's best not to use their names," she said. don't get attached to the animals. We reached the mouth of the cave. The sun waited near the horizon, low over the treetops that leaned away from the pit, like they still feared it. The light hit my face, and I shut my eyes, breathing it in like it was medicine. It was golden, real, beautiful, but it wasn't as warm as I remembered. And I couldn't tell if it was because the sun had changed or because something inside me had. Story 3. My job is to clean an office building whose name is only an address. That's not me being poetic. On my schedule, on the few pieces of paperwork I've been given, on the little label stuck to the janitor closet door, it's just numbers and a street. Like the building doesn't deserve a real name, or like giving it one would make it too easy to talk about. I work alone. I'm the only cleaner. It's a long day, and the place has 4 floors. I do all of it by myself, every day in and day out, until the hours blur together and I start thinking in a checklist instead of sentences. Denver, if it matters, which it doesn't. I only mention it because people always ask, like the city is supposed to explain something. Like altitude or dry air, or the weird way the weather changes can make a person see things. But I've lived in Colorado long enough to know the difference between the sun is messing with your head and something is wrong. I'm expected to make every room spotless, with one exception. There's a hallway that also doesn't have a name. No sign, no plaque, no little corporate label. Everyone calls it the Hall of Doors, and I didn't even learn that from a manager. I learned it from 2 office workers who said it with the kind of tone people use when they're repeating an inside joke for the 100th time. Later I found out they meant it literally, like the Hall of Doors in the second Rayman game. That should tell you exactly what kind of people work in this place. Well-dressed, serious faces. And then that kind of reference drops out of their mouths like it's normal. I am not allowed to enter the Hall of Doors. Not, please don't. Not only with permission. Not, there's construction. Not even, it's private. Not allowed. And I don't just get told once. I get daily reminder texts. They show up like clockwork. The same time every morning, with the same simple wording. Don't enter the Hall of Doors. Don't open any doors in the Hall of Doors. Don't clean the Hall of Doors. As if I'm going to forget. As if I'm the sort of person who needs daily reminders not to walk into a place with a name like that. Sometimes the messages come from different numbers. Sometimes they come from the same one for a week and then change. I've tried replying before, just to see what would happen. Nothing. No read receipt. No answer. It feels like texting a machine. Most of the time, I know next to nothing about what the office workers actually do. I'm not being mean. I'm being honest. They all sit at computers and type like their lives depend on it. Fast, frantic typing. The kind that makes you think they're solving a crisis every day, every hour. But then you look at their screens and it's all blocks and boxes and tiny text. Spreadsheets, charts, long emails. Things that look important until you try to understand them and realize it might as well be in another language. When I ask what they do, they shrug. Not rude, exactly. More like they don't understand the question. Like, what do you do here? Isn't something you're supposed to say out loud. They don't really notice me. I don't mean that in a sad way, like I'm begging for attention. I've cleaned buildings before. People tend to look through you when you're holding a mop. In most places, it's annoying, but normal. Here, it's different. It's like my presence doesn't register, like I'm part of the building, like a water cooler or a fire extinguisher. Sometimes I'll be pushing my cart down a hallway, keys jingling, wheels squeaking, and someone will step out of an office and walk right toward me without looking up, and I'll have to stop, because if I don't, we'll collide. They'll pass by so close their shoulder almost brushes mine, and they won't even glance over. They do have meetings. Lots of them. They rotate through conference rooms all day, and I have to clean those rooms too. But I'm not allowed to enter while they're in there. I have to wait in the hallway until they leave. The door's shut. The voices inside go low. Sometimes I hear laughter, short and sharp, like someone told a joke they shouldn't have. Sometimes I hear nothing at all, just silence that feels deliberate. When they finally file out, they do it in a hurry, like the room itself makes them uncomfortable. They don't look at me. They don't say, "Excuse me." They just stream past, and then it's my turn to go in and erase whatever proof they were there. One time they forgot to erase the whiteboard. That's not unusual in general. People leave notes up all the time. But what they left wasn't notes. It was the Fibonacci sequence. I mean the actual sequence. Starting with the small numbers and just going. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. On and on and on until the board was filled edge to edge. Not even written neatly. It looked rushed, like someone had been in a panic to get it all down before time ran out. I stood there for a long second with my sponge in my hand and my mouth slightly open. It felt like walking into the wrong classroom, like I'd stumbled into someone's math obsession by accident. Surely it wasn't a strange math class, but I did wonder. I tried to imagine a corporate meeting where everyone agrees the best use of their time is to fill a board with a number pattern most people only remember from school. Then I erased it, because that's what I do. I erase. I wipe away. I make the surface blank again so nobody has to think too hard about what was there. Every day when I get to work, I park in a giant empty lot. It's too big for the number of people in the building. It's too clean, too freshly painted, like it's waiting for a crowd that never comes. I've been told there's a subterranean parking garage where the workers park. I've never seen it. Not once. I don't know where the entrance is. I don't know which door or ramp leads down there, and that irritates me more than it should, because I clean the whole building. I mop the floors, wipe the glass, vacuum the corners, empty the bins. I should know how to get to every space. That's part of the job. Buildings have patterns. They make sense if you spend enough time inside them. But this one doesn't want me to know everything. When I arrive, all the workers are already there. Every time. It doesn't matter if I come earlier. It doesn't matter if I'm running late. Somehow they are always already inside, already at their desks, already typing. And they always leave during the same part of the day, during the stretch when I'm going through and cleaning all the conference rooms. Day in, day out. Like a scheduled tide. I've wanted to change the order I clean things in. Not just because I'm bored, but because I'm curious. What would happen if I cleaned the conference rooms first? Would I catch one of the meetings? Would I finally see where they go when they all vanish? Would I find the garage entrance by accident? But management is strict. Strict in a quiet way, not yelling, not threatening, just a firm set of rules that never bend. If I try to do a task out of order, I get a text. Not a friend reminder, not a question, a correction. As if someone is watching my route through the building in real time and moving pieces around on a board. Management is also strange in another way. In a first for my cleaning career, I actually worked directly for the corporation that owns the building. No cleaning company, no middleman, no supervisor showing up once a week to check supplies. Just me and the corporation. But I don't know the corporation's name. I got this job by answering what I thought was a spam text. I was desperate enough to reply, even though the message was weird and vague and didn't say what company it was from. It just asked if I wanted work. It offered a daily rate that was too good to ignore. It promised steady hours. I texted back, yes. They told me to show up the next morning for an interview at the address. The interview was with a smiling bald man. I remember him too clearly because everything about him felt like a performance. His smile was bright but fixed. His eyes were friendly but empty, like they were copying the shape of friendliness without understanding it. He didn't ask about my cleaning experience. He didn't ask for references. He didn't ask how I handle chemicals or whether I know how to strip and wax floors. He asked 3 things. He asked if I'm a firstborn. I'm not. He asked if I own any cats. I don't. He asked if I can work weekends. I now work 7 days a week. That was it. That was the interview. He slid a paper across the table. I signed. I was handed a key card, a set of instructions, and a promise that everything I needed would be in the janitor closet. As you can tell, this place is not great with communication, and the office workers only ever say management, never a name. Like naming the thing in charge would make it too real. Sometimes they don't even speak English. There are a lot of different native languages in this building, from all around the world. I hear accents I can't place. I hear languages I don't recognize at all. If someone is on the phone near the elevators, it can sound like the whole world is squeezed into this one office tower. I don't know where the company is headquartered. I don't know where the person they call the CEO is from either, because whenever anyone needs to speak with him, they go into the hall of doors. That's the pattern. If there's an argument, they go into the hall of doors. If someone looks upset, tight-faced, and pale, they go into the hall of doors. If someone comes in carrying a folder like it weighs 100 pounds, they go into the hall of doors. Then, after some amount of time, they come out again looking calmer, like their edges have been smoothed down, like they've been reminded of something they didn't want to remember. I never saw the CEO. Not once. I only heard people talk about him like he was a storm system that might drift in at any moment. The CEO is coming. The CEO wants updates. The CEO didn't like that result. The CEO wants another meeting. Always the CEO. Never a first name, never a last name, never a face. Which brings me to the day I went into the hall of doors. It wasn't for a good reason. I knew I could get fired. Maybe I wanted that. Maybe a part of me was tired of cleaning until my hands were cracked and my back felt like it was filled with gravel. Maybe I wanted to do something that was mine for once, even if it was stupid. But it wasn't just rebellion. I got it in my head that I needed to see the CEO with my own eyes. I needed proof. With how these people talked about him, with how they treated that hallway like a holy place you don't step into, I needed to confirm that he was real. I know that sounds strange, but it felt necessary. Like my brain was itching at a loose thread, and I couldn't stop myself from pulling it. For the first time since I started working there, I wondered why the place doesn't feel the need for security. There are cameras, I think. I've seen domes in the corners of hallways, but I never see security guards. There's no front desk where someone checks visitors. The doors are locked, sure, but I have a key card, and apparently that makes me invisible. Nobody questions why I'm there. Nobody stops me. It's like the building only cares about rules when it wants to. That day, I just finished cleaning the last conference room. The chairs were pushed in. The table was wiped. The floor smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I was tired in that deep way where your body keeps moving, but your mind feels slow and far away. I pushed my cart into the hallway and saw the entrance to the Hall of Doors. No sign, no warning. Just a stretch of hallway like any other, except that the air felt cooler there, like it had its own temperature. I looked both ways. No one, no witnesses. My heart started beating harder, not from exercise, but from the simple fact that I was about to do something I wasn't supposed to do. I told myself I was just going to peek, just a quick look. I could step in, glance around, step out. No harm. I'd satisfy my curiosity and go back to scrubbing coffee stains out of carpets. So I walked in. I did it casually, like I belonged there, like I was supposed to be cleaning it. I even lowered my mop and made a few slow strokes across the floor, like this was just another section of my route. In my head, I kept repeating the same thought. Act normal, act invisible, act like the building itself expects you. No one really notices me anyway. The Hall of Doors looked normal. That was the first weird thing. It looked no different from the other hallways. Same carpet, same lights, same bland walls, except the televisions were missing. In every other hallway, there are TVs mounted on the walls, playing news channels all day. Sports, weather, breaking headlines, stock numbers scrolling by. They're always on, always talking. A constant noise that makes the building feel alive. In the Hall of Doors, there were no TVs, no voices, no talking heads, no scrolling tickers. Just quiet and doors. Office doors, maybe. Plain wooden doors, each one identical, each one closed. There were a lot of them. More than made sense for the length of the hallway, like the building had squeezed extra doors into the space the way you squeeze extra files into a drawer that shouldn't shut. And the hallway was clean. Not clean enough, not I'll get to it later. Clean in a way that made my skin crawl, like it had never been touched, like dust didn't dare settle there, like no one's shoes ever truly dirtied it. I took another slow step, mop sliding ahead of me, and then I heard voices approaching. Footsteps, two people talking. My stomach dropped. I froze for half a second, then my body moved before my brain could catch up. I grabbed the nearest door handle and pulled it open and stepped through. I expected a closet, a storage room, an office. Instead, I stepped out into the open air. Bright daylight hit my eyes. Heat hit my skin. I blinked, stunned, and found myself on a busy walkway surrounded by immaculate architecture. Pale stone buildings, clean lines, carved details. People moving around me like this was a normal afternoon. Every sign I could see was in Italian. I stood there holding the door open, mop still in my hand, my cleaning cart obviously not with me anymore. I must have looked insane. I turned around. Behind me was the same plain wooden door. No frame, no special markings, nothing that suggested it belonged in the middle of a city street. It looked like someone had installed a cheap office door in the side of reality. I turned back again because my head couldn't stop spinning, and that's when I saw a man in white robes come around a distant corner. He wasn't alone. There was an escort with him, moving in a tight cluster. Not quite soldiers, not quite bodyguards, but a group of people walking with purpose, like they were making a path. Something about the way they moved made the hair on my arms lift. I didn't wait to find out what they were doing. I stepped back through the door. The hallway swallowed me. The air cooled instantly, like I'd walked into a refrigerator. The fluorescent lights hummed above. My lungs filled with the bland, recycled office smell again. I shut the door behind me and stood there for a second, hand still on the handle, heart hammering like it was trying to escape my ribs. Then the voices got closer. The office workers. 2 of them walking toward me. I panicked all over again. Another door, I thought. I'll hide in another room. I'll duck in, wait, then slip out after they pass. Easy. I opened the next door I could reach and stepped through. Night. Neon signs everywhere, the air thick with city noise and bright colors. I caught sight of Korean characters glowing on storefronts, a street full of people, headlights, reflections on wet pavement. I didn't even take a full step out. I turned and went back in. The door shut, and I was back in the hall of doors again, and now the hallway felt different. Not physically, not in a way I could point at, but in a way that made my whole body tense. Before, it had just been a forbidden hallway. Now it felt like a trap full of loaded weapons disguised as doors. I didn't want to look at any of them. I didn't want to open another one. I didn't want to know how many places were attached to this hallway, like hooks in a wall. The footsteps and voices were almost on top of me. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I kept mopping. I lowered my head, moved the mop back and forth, and started walking, pushing myself along the hallway like I'd always been there, like this was normal, like I wasn't just one wrong door away from ending up somewhere I'd never come back from. I mopped my way back toward the part of the building I was allowed to be in, and I passed the 2 office workers. They were still talking, not even noticing me. 100%, one of them was saying, laughing. "Man, can you believe the CEO is coming?" "Yeah, man," the other replied, like this was the biggest thrill of his life. "The CEO coming here. Imagine." I kept my eyes on the floor. My mop left a wet trail behind it. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the handle tighter. I expected them to stop me. I expected them to ask what I was doing there. I expected a hand on my shoulder, a sharp voice, an alarm. Instead, they walked right past me. Then, as I moved away, I heard one of them say, still laughing, "And that's when she made that crazy face and ran off." "I mean, I would too," the other one answered. My blood went cold. They were talking about me. They had seen me. They had watched me panic. They had watched me open a door and disappear. And they were laughing like it was a normal story you tell your coworker on the way to get coffee. If either of them noticed me in the human sense, they didn't show it. They didn't look at me. They didn't slow down. They didn't act like I was a person standing 2 feet away. They acted like I was a rumor, a funny little event the building produced for their entertainment. I made it out of the hall of doors and back into the normal corridors with the TVs and the constant noise. I didn't run. I wanted to run. But running would mean admitting something happened. Running would mean I was real enough to chase. So I moved at the same steady pace I always move. Mop, step, like a machine. Nobody stopped me. Nobody texted me. Nobody dragged me into an office. Nobody fired me. I went back to my cart, finished the rest of my tasks, clocked out, and drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel the whole way. The next morning, I got the same reminder text I always get. Don't enter the hall of doors. It didn't mention that I had. It didn't accuse me. It didn't threaten me. It just reminded me. Like the building itself had taken a breath, reset the board, and decided to let me keep playing as long as I didn't make that move again. Apparently, nobody told on me. Or if they did, it didn't matter. Or management already knew and was waiting to see what I'd do. I still work in that building, and now I try as hard as I can to never think about that hallway with all those doors. I tell myself it was a weird dream, that I was tired, that the fluorescent lights got to me, that my brain filled in gaps because the day was too repetitive, and my mind needed something new to chew on. Because if it was real, then the world doesn't make sense the way I need it to. If it was real, then a door in a hallway in an office building in Denver can open onto places that don't belong to me, places that might not want me there, places with people in white robes and escorts who walk like they're not going to stop for a confused cleaner holding a mop. If it was real, then the Hall of Doors isn't just a hallway with a nerdy nickname. It's a tool. It's a shortcut. It's a mouth. And the people who work here know exactly what it is. They go in to speak with the CEO and they come out looking calm, like they've been reset, like they've been reminded of the rules. And I'm the only cleaner, scrubbing 4 floors alone, day in and day out, wiping fingerprints off glass and erasing whiteboards full of numbers that feel like warnings, pretending I don't notice how the parking lot is always empty, pretending I don't care where the garage is, pretending I don't wonder why everyone arrives before me and leaves in the same strange window every day. So here I am, cleaning, day in, day out. And when I pass that hallway, I keep my eyes on the floor, because I learned something important the moment I opened that first door and stepped into daylight that didn't belong to my city. Some doors aren't meant to be open. Some doors don't lead to rooms. Some doors lead to the kind of proof you can't unsee. And once you have it, you don't get to go back to being the person who didn't know. Story 4. My name is Ryan. A couple of years before I'm writing this, I was a 30-something who could barely hold himself together. I was the kind of guy who told himself he was just going through a rough patch. Even though the rough patch had lasted so long, it had started to feel like my actual personality. I lived in a dump of an apartment. 1 bedroom, a so-called living room, and a bathroom so small it felt like an airplane bathroom that somebody had ripped out and shoved into a corner. The floor wasn't really a floor anymore. It was layers. Old takeout bags, fast food wrappers, empty boxes, dirty laundry, bottles, random junk I didn't need but never threw away. I hadn't seen clear carpet in years. You could stand in one spot and look around and realize there wasn't a a single place you could step without stepping on something. I barely worked, just enough hours to pay rent and keep the lights on. Most of my free time I spent drunk, because being drunk made the mess feel farther away. It made the shame feel quieter. It made time pass without me having to be present for it. I didn't eat real food. I lived off frozen stuff, chips, and whatever I could grab without thinking. I honestly can't remember the last time I bought something green on purpose. I hadn't eaten a vegetable in about 3 years, which is why what happened next still feels like a joke someone played on me. One morning, I woke up, shuffled into the bathroom for what I thought was going to be my normal weekly bathroom trip, and then I looked down and saw something that made me blink like my eyes were broken. Corn. Bright little yellow pieces sitting there like they had every right to be there. I stared at it for a long time, half disgusted and half confused. It made no sense. I hadn't eaten corn. I hadn't eaten anything that should have corn in it. I didn't even remember eating anything that could be mistaken for corn. My first thought was that I must have done it while I was drunk. That was always the easiest explanation for anything weird in my life. I figured maybe I had some random craving, stumbled into a store, and bought corn like a normal human being for once, then forgot about it completely. It was strange, but not impossible. So I flushed, washed my hands, and moved on. But the corn came back. The next week there was corn again. Then, a few days later, corn again. At first it was funny in a gross way, like my body was playing a prank on me. Then it stopped being funny and started being unsettling. After a month, I couldn't laugh about it anymore. After 2 months, I was honestly losing it. Every couple of days, there it was, corn, like a receipt for a meal I never remembered eating. I started paying attention to what I ate, not because I cared about health, but because I wanted to catch the moment corn could have entered my life. It never did. I ate the same trash I always ate. No salads, no vegetables, no corn, and still it kept showing up. Then something else started happening, and that's when the whole thing stopped feeling like a weird stomach issue, and it started feeling like a story I didn't want to be in. One morning I woke up, sat up in bed, and realized I could see the floor. Not all of it. Not clean, shining carpet, but a stretch of actual visible floor that wasn't covered by trash. It was like a chunk of the mess had been removed overnight, like somebody had carved out a path through it. My first thought was, again, drunk me did it. Drunk me was chaotic, but he had done random productive things before. I'd woken up to text messages I didn't remember sending. I'd woken up to half-cooked food in the microwave. I'd woken up with bruises and no memory of how I got them. Cleaning wasn't that much of a stretch. I looked around and realized there was still trash everywhere, but less than there used to be. The piles had shrunk. Some bags were gone. Some boxes were collapsed and stacked like someone had tried to organize them. And I didn't question it because it wasn't a bad thing. I liked having a little path to walk without stepping on old food containers. I liked not having to shuffle sideways through my own filth, so I let it happen. Then it got weirder. I would wake up and not have a hangover. That should have been impossible, considering how I drank. I would wake up and feel normal, not great, but not poisoned. My mouth wouldn't taste like metal. My head wouldn't feel like it was being squeezed in a vice. I started having more bowel movements, too, which I know is not a classy detail, but it matters. My body started acting like it was being fed real food, like something inside me had changed without asking permission. Then I noticed my clothes were clean. Not just clean, like I pulled something from the less dirty pile. Clean like washed and folded. And I stared at the neat stacks like they were evidence from a crime scene. Because washing and folding would have taken hours. Drunk me would not have done that. Sober me definitely hadn't. Then one day I came home, and the floor looked like it had been mopped. Mopped. The place smelled faintly clean, like that cheap lemon cleaner people use in offices. The problem was, I didn't own a mop. I didn't own anything you could mop with. I didn't even own the kind of motivation required to borrow a mop a floor, and then return it. Even then, I didn't fully face what it meant. I danced around it in my head because the alternative was too big. I told myself I was sleepwalking. I told myself I was blacking out and doing productive stuff without remembering. I told myself anything that let me keep enjoying the results without thinking too hard about the cause. I might have kept doing that forever if it weren't for the bed. I came home from work one day, half exhausted, and stopped in the doorway of my bedroom like I'd run into a wall. My bed was made, not just blanket tossed over it, made. Corners tucked, pillow placed neatly, like a hotel bed almost. And that was when the denial finally cracked, because there was no version of me, drunk or sober, that made my bed. I never made my bed. It wasn't a habit. It wasn't a goal. It wasn't even a thought. Drunk me couldn't have done it because drunk me wasn't there. I'd been at work, and sober me didn't do it either, which meant someone else did. My first thought wasn't someone broke in, because I know how that sounds, and because it's not where your mind goes when your life has been sad for a long time. My first thought was almost hopeful. Like maybe there was a normal explanation if I found it fast enough. Maybe my landlord came in. Maybe he thought my place was a health hazard and did something. Maybe a neighbor smelled something awful and complained, and somebody got sent in to check. Maybe a family member I hadn't talked to in years decided to surprise me. Then I remembered my old friend from high school. About a month before all this started, he had messaged me online. Just a simple message, asking how I was doing, saying he wanted to catch up. I wasn't excited about it. I wasn't really excited about anyone seeing me because being seen meant being judged. Still, he was probably the best guy I ever knew. He was one of the few people who ever tried to be friends with me back then, even when I had nothing interesting to say. So I replied. He suggested hanging out. I told him we could meet out front of my apartment building, talk for a bit. I figured we'd keep it casual, keep it outside, keep him from seeing how I lived. But he pushed it further. He actually came inside the complex and started talking to my landlord, who happened to be there. And because my friend had always been the kind of person who assumed the best in everyone, he told the landlord who he was and asked where my apartment was. My landlord told him, just like that. No, I can't give out tenant info. No, call him. Nothing. So my old friend knocked on my door, and the second I opened it, he saw everything. The smell hit him. The mess hit him. The fact that I was living like a raccoon in human skin hit him. He blinked, clearly shocked. "Oh," he said. like his brain had to reboot. How have you been, man? I'm fine, I said, and I could feel my face burning with embarrassment. Do you want to go outside? We didn't step into my apartment. We walked out to the front of the complex and talked there. He asked what I'd been up to, and I gave him the simplest answer possible. Not much. He didn't push. He just nodded like he understood, or like he was trying to be kind. I asked how he'd been. His life was going great. He was married. He had a job that paid well. He had a house. He talked about plans and trips and normal adult life, and the whole time I felt more and more aware of how far behind I was. Like someone had put his life next to mine just to prove a point. I don't want to say I was filled with jealousy, but I was definitely reminded of how bad my situation was. I already knew it, but hearing him talk made it sharper, like rubbing salt into a cut you'd been trying to ignore. At some point, he said it straight, with no drama. "Dude," he told me, "you live in a mess." I flinched because even though it was true, it still hurt. He kept going, voice serious now. "You can't keep living like that. It's going to kill you." I don't even remember what I said back. Probably something defensive. Probably something like, "Yeah, easy for you to say." I was embarrassed and angry and ashamed all at once. And shame makes you mean if you're not careful. But he didn't get mad. He didn't insult me. He didn't walk away. He offered help. "Look, man," he said, "if you ever need it, I can help you clean up your apartment. And maybe the rest of your life. Just call me. I'll help." Then he said he had to go, but he repeated it again before he left. "Don't hesitate to ask. Call me." I mean it. I never called him back. But after I found my bed made, and after I stared at my folded clothes, and after I saw the mopped floor and the shrinking piles of trash, I started wondering if he meant it so hard he'd actually done something crazy. Maybe he got a spare key from my landlord. Maybe he came by when I was asleep or at work. Maybe he decided he was going to save me even if I didn't ask. The idea was ridiculous, but so was everything else. Before I called him, I practiced what I would say because it sounded insane, no matter how I tried to phrase it. "Hey, just checking. Have you been breaking into my apartment to slowly clean it and feed me vegetables while I'm unconscious?" It sounded like something you'd hear on a late-night radio show. I finally called him anyway and asked carefully if he wanted to come by my place someday. He said yes, but it would be in a couple of months. A couple of months. That didn't match what was happening in my apartment at all. That night, I set up cameras. Not fancy ones. Cheap ones. Just enough to cover the corners of my living room and the hallway to my bedroom. I felt stupid doing it, but I felt more stupid pretending everything was normal. I went to bed with a weird mix of fear and excitement in my chest, like I was about to catch a thief or a ghost, or proof that I was losing my mind. The next day, I checked the footage, and I almost threw up. Something came out of the shadow in the corner of my room like it had been folded inside the darkness. At first, my brain tried to call it a trick of the camera, a glitch, a weird shadow shape shifting. Then it moved. It moved along the ceiling like a spider. It moved across the floor sideways like a crab. Long, thin, wrong. It looked starving, like it had never been meant to have a body in the first place. Its torso looked too long, like a stretched-out cage, and the ribs were visible near the top, sharp under the skin like they could burst through at any second. Its head was narrow and dome-shaped, and where the eyes should be, there were only dents, smooth skin stretched over them like a face that had forgotten how to be a face. Its arms were the worst part. Too many. At least 8. But sometimes more seemed to appear and disappear depending on how it turned. Like it was made of angles that didn't hold still. The joints bent in ways I couldn't understand. It looked like it should snap itself in half every time it reached for something. But it didn't. It started cleaning. It scooped up trash with fast, practiced movements. It carried bags out of frame, then came back, over and over. Hours of it. Like it was doing a job. Then, at some point, it returned holding a container and a big glass. It moved toward my bed, toward the shape of me passed out under the covers. My whole body went cold watching it, because whatever this thing was, it was close enough to touch me. It leaned over me and reached out one arm. The arm bent at strange angles, slow and careful, and it pulled the covers up over my body like it was tucking me in. It left my head exposed. Then it tilted the glass and poured water down my throat. I watched myself swallow in my sleep. Then it fed me. It took food from the container and placed it in my mouth, piece after piece, waiting for my sleeping body to chew and swallow. Strawberries, spinach, cucumber, and, of course, corn. When it finished, it backed away and returned to the corner of the room and slid into the shadow like it belonged there, like the darkness was its real home, and the rest of my apartment was just a workspace. I sat there in my chair, staring at the screen for a long time, unable to move. My mind kept trying to do what minds do when they see something impossible. It tried to shrink it, rename it, explain it away. But there it was. Now I know what you're thinking. I should have run. I should have grabbed whatever I could carry and never looked back. That's the logical choice, the safe choice, the choice people say they'd make when they're not the one living it. But you have to understand what my life was like before this started. I was miserable. I was rotten in a tiny apartment, alone, surrounded by filth, drinking myself numb, eating like I didn't care if I lived. I went to bed every night feeling like nothing mattered, and woke up feeling worse. And suddenly I was waking up in a cleaner apartment, with less trash, with folded clothes, with water in my system, with actual food in my body. I started feeling better. I started bathing more. I started drinking less. I even started cleaning up my own messes because it didn't feel impossible anymore. Something was improving my life, even if it was terrifying. It even got me a job interview. I don't know how. I don't know how a thing like that sent an email or filled out an application or made anything happen in the normal world. But one day I had an interview lined up for a job that paid way more than what I was doing. And I got it. My life kept climbing out of the hole. I became more social. I laughed more. I started talking to a girl, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a joke standing next to normal people. And the strange part is, the creature became normal to me in a way I hate admitting. I stopped checking the cameras. I knew what I'd see, and honestly, I didn't want to see it every night. It was easier to pretend I didn't know the details. Easier to accept the results. Then, months later, I heard a knock at my door. I opened it and froze. My old friend stood there with a cleaning caddy, packed like he was ready for war. sponges, different sprays, brushes, 2 cans of Febreze. All the stuff a person brings when they plan to walk into a disaster. He stepped inside and stopped like someone had hit him with the stun gun. My apartment was spotless. Not better, spotless. He almost dropped the caddy before catching it against his leg. We talked for hours. Real talking. Not the empty, not much I'd given him before. I told him about my new job, the girl I'd been seeing, the way everything had turned around. He told me about his wife, his work, the way he had been moving around a lot because of his job. He admitted he'd been in my city for a short time, saw me online, and decided to check in. He told me that after he saw how I was living, he couldn't just walk away. He said he planned to come back and help me clean. That's why he brought all the supplies. He was serious. We both laughed at how stupid it looked now, him standing in my clean apartment holding enough cleaning products for a crime scene. By the time we stopped talking, it was late. Really late. He said he lived across the state now, and it would be a 5-hour drive back. I told him to stay the night. He hesitated, but eventually agreed, saying he'd call his wife and tell her he'd drive home in the morning. When he got off the phone, I offered him my bed. He refused. I insisted. I told him he was the guest, and I'd sleep on the old futon in the living room, the one I was pretty sure came with the apartment. After enough arguing, he finally relented. That night, I fell asleep fast, maybe because I felt something I hadn't felt in years, like I wasn't alone in my life anymore. In the morning, my friend was gone. I didn't question it at first. He'd said he'd leave early. I figured he didn't want to wake me. I texted him later, telling him I was glad he came by, that it was good to see him. He didn't answer. I told myself he was busy. Then the police showed up. I opened the door and saw the uniform and felt my stomach drop. "Ryan Miller?" the officer asked, and there was a strange mix of concern and suspicion in his voice. Yes, I said. "That's me." He glanced into my apartment like he was expecting to see something else, something worse. "May I come in?" he asked. "You're not in trouble. We just need to speak with you." I let him in, heart pounding. He explained that my friend had been reported missing, that his wife couldn't reach him, that he'd never come home. They had found his car parked on the side of the road about 3 hours away from my place, but he wasn't inside it. The officer told me they didn't think I had anything to do with it, but I was the last known person to see him, so they needed to ask. "Did he complain about anything?" the officer asked. "Did he mention being unhappy? Work problems? Anything that would make him disappear on purpose?" I tried to think back through the night. My friend had seemed happy. Tired, sure. Stressed in the normal way adults are stressed. But not desperate, not broken, not running away from a life. "No," I said finally. "Nothing like that." He didn't say anything that would explain this. The officer watched my face for a moment, like he was trying to decide if I was lying or just scared. Then he left, and I stood in my clean apartment feeling like the walls had shifted. It took me 3 hours of pacing and spiraling before I remembered the cameras. They were still recording. My hands shook as I pulled up the footage from the night before. I watched it all, even the boring parts. Because I needed to know. I needed to see if my friend left in the middle of the night, if someone knocked, if anything happened. Then I saw the creature. It came out of the shadow again, unfolding like something crawling out of a crack in reality. But this time, it didn't go toward me. It went straight toward the bedroom. It moved too fast for something that looked so fragile. It crossed the room like it was floating, like the floor meant nothing to it. When it reached the bedroom doorway, it stopped and stared. It stared the way an animal stares at food. It didn't have eyes, not really, but it stared anyway, head angled forward, body still. I saw something wet shine on the skin near where a mouth should be, like saliva gathering. It stayed like that for hours. Hours of watching my friend sleep in my bed. And the whole time I sat there watching the footage, my mind trying to refuse what my eyes were telling it. Then morning came. My friend's alarm went off. He got up quietly. He moved carefully, sneaking past me on the futon so he wouldn't wake me. Just like I'd assumed. Right before the alarm, the creature slid back into the shadow, like it was hiding, like it knew it needed to be unseen. I watched my friend leave. I watched him step outside. I watched him walk toward where his car had been parked. Then I watched the creature leave too. Not through the door, through the window. It slipped out on the same side of the building, the same direction my friend went. I don't know what happened after that. The cameras didn't show the outside. I don't know if it killed him. I don't know if it ate him. I don't know if it dragged him somewhere I can't understand. But the moment I saw it follow him, I finally understood something I should have understood the first time I saw that thing in my apartment. It was never safe. It wasn't helping me because it cared about me. It was doing something else, and I had been too grateful to question the price. I left. I didn't just leave the complex. I left the state. I moved to the opposite side of the country. I didn't even pack properly. I grabbed one briefcase and filled it with the few things that were valuable or would be a pain to replace. Documents, a couple items, anything I could carry fast. Then I got on the road and didn't stop until the distance felt like a wall. I never told the police about the cameras. I never showed anyone the footage. I knew how it would sound. I knew nobody would believe me, and I couldn't stand the idea of staying in place long enough for anyone to decide I was crazy. I just ran. Years passed. I built a new life. I got a good job. I moved into a nicer apartment. The girl I'd been talking to back then didn't understand what I was doing, and I couldn't blame her. How do you explain that you're leaving because something you can't describe might be living in your shadows? So we stopped seeing each other, and I let that go too. But I kept the habits. I cleaned up after myself. I stopped drinking. I made sure no garbage ended up on the floor. I ate better. I went on daily walks. I took care of my body like it was something I planned to keep. And for a long time, everything was fine. It almost started to feel like the past belonged to somebody else. Like that man in the filthy apartment had been a different person, and I had finally grown out of him. Then one day I slept in. I woke up late, panicked, and rushed through my morning like my life depended on it. I skipped steps. I cut corners. I didn't have time to do anything extra. I definitely didn't make my bed. When I came home that night, exhausted from work, I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and walked toward my bedroom without thinking. Then I stopped. My bed was made, corners tucked, pillow placed neatly, like a hotel bed, like someone had been there, like something had followed me across the country, waited patiently for years, and decided to remind me that it still knew where I lived.